My talk is on control systems engineering, and the title is phrased in a rhetorical question, right? And my hope is to be able to show you that yes, control systems engineering has a lot to offer for mHealth interventions. And the way I'm going to structure this talk is, first of all, talk about what I mean by control systems engineering. It's actually a technology that all of you have interacted with in some way or form, even if you haven't realized it. And then I'll share with you one of my professional hobbies, which is recognizing dynamic behavior in systems. Okay, so I collect these, so I have a few to show you. I wish I had, I could show you more. And then I will describe how we come up with decision algorithms, if you want to call them decision rules, using control systems engineering methodologies. Okay, and in fact, I am going to show you how I would design an if-then rule based on control engineering. And that's something that I'm doing for you guys, first time I've done it. Okay, well, and we'll see, and give you a sense for the mindset. Already, again, I'm benefiting from being, last year I was on the first day, this year I'm on Wednesday. I'm benefiting from all the great talks from Donna, Bonnie, Ben, Billy, so I'm in a good spot to be able to draw from things that have been said before. And then, the important part of control engineering is being able to have a dynamical model. So I will talk about how we can get these models and how behavioral theories can inform the model development, touch on that, and I'll describe this physical activity intervention called Just Walk that Eric and I have worked on, and then my pitch. Eric sort of preceded this with a pitch for the control optimization trial, that our hope is that this will be part of your arsenal, part of your toolkit, okay? And then some concluding remarks, okay? Now, Eric brought this up before, that we have a lot of papers that we've written. These are two useful ones. One that Eric spearheaded in JMIR, it's open access, easily available. And then we also have a chapter in the edited volume of Linda Collins's MOST series. And if you have a good Springer Link subscription in your university, you might be able to have access to this free of charge. So, and then there's a ton of other papers. We have something for everybody, behavioral scientists, engineers, computer scientists, and I'll call attention to Eric's webinar that was done about a month ago. And he, again, his take, he hit on a few things in his talk, but it's worth it. It complements the kind of things that I'm going to talk about. So basically, in control systems engineering, we're dealing with systems that have dynamics that change over time. And we're interested in strategies, algorithms that take dynamic system behavior from undesirable conditions to desirable ones. Okay? And this is a field that is applicable in many areas. It's seen in consumer products, home heating and cooling. We've heard Dana talk about the artificial pancreas, and that's a form of closed loop control system, when there are a lot of control engineers working on the artificial pancreas. And there's a nice link from the Control Systems Society website that talks about success stories and grand challenges. And if I could give you one brief but important summary, watch it. This is one example here, for instance, in climate control in a car. A system that has, like climate control is a closed loop system where you specify a set point, a desired value for the temperature in the car cabin, and then the adjustments in the airflow and the coolant flow are made automatically, as opposed to having to manually deal with things. So when you see anything that has an automatic mode on it, it alludes to a closed loop control system. And again, my general observation that is very important. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to transfer variability. That's what a control system does from, so you have an outcome of interest. We call that a control variable, and that could be, your physical activity, your weight, temperature, and this is varying in a way that is undesirable. And then you have things that you can manipulate. These are cheaper resources that you have available to you, and it could be whatever daily goals, training sessions, dosages of medication, a flow rate, and a control system will then, in an automated manner, reduce the variability in this important outcome by transferring it to something that can be adjusted, okay? And by having this uniformity in this important outcome, then this has a lot of benefits. And then we could apply other decision policies to optimize this even further. So this idea, this transfer variance, is critical to what a control system does. Now this here is a little video that I guess this is Eric, your dad's boat.
Yep.
And Eric showed this in his webinar, and he showed it in other talks. So when you have a navigation autopilot, you can see the little auto here, right? The important outcome is getting to the place you want to go, not getting lost and ending up like Gilligan's Island or something like that, right? And then here the wheel is turning, and that's the variability that you have in order to be able to get to where you want to go despite the dynamics of being in the water, the changes in currents, disturbances, and all sorts of other things. Okay, now the control engineering approach that I'm going to describe is, first I'm going to talk about how do you get these decision algorithms, these controllers as we call it, and there's different, through model-based methodologies. They all have acronyms. IMC and MPC are two of the ones that we like to use. And then I'll talk about how you can use system identification as a means to get dynamical models from data. So we need to have problems that have interesting dynamics, and here's a little bit of my, as I said, my hobby, my collection of problems that are behavioral in nature. This is data from a study done by Jared Younger, who used to be at Stanford. He's now at UAB. And he was interested in using low-dose naltrexone to treat fibromyalgia. And when I ran into his data set, I was not involved in designing this study. As a controls engineer, I literally went gaga because he had, he had a daily report, and then he had everything on continuous scales. So when I look at this and I see the change in the dosage, and then you can see a transient response that sort of, it's got some noise and variability, sort of corresponds to a first order system. I immediately can see that, hey, my methods can be useful for this in this problem space. This other example comes from a grant that a project with Daniel Downs at Penn State University. It's called the Healthy Mom Zone. This is basically an intervention to manage gestational weight gain in obese and overweight women. And here what's intriguing to me is that when you're dealing with weight gain and loss, now again, these are pregnant women, so that's why they're increasing in their weight. And there's so much complexity, the metabolism and whatnot, but as far as the dynamic behavior, this is what we call an integrating system. This ramp response denotes an integrating system. And actually, it's very simple models that describe these dynamics. And this other one is one of my favorites. Again, this is sort of a secondary data, but we were involved in working with the University of Wisconsin Center for Tobacco Research Intervention some years ago. And this is now average over cohorts, but the participants, I think, were given bupropion, and they had their quit date, and then you can see this increase in craving before the craving then settled down, and then this is the appropriate cigarette consumption and the relapse. So this phenomena here, where things go in a different way than you would like, is what's called inverse response. They can be described by second order differential equations. In fact, what you have is basically, you have two competing processes, and they end up giving you this interesting dynamic behavior. Now this is average over cohort data, but just to show you that this can happen for single participants, these are selected participants, where you can, one was with placebo and the other one with active drug, and you can see this inverse response phenomena. So these again are problems where the response is changing day by day, and things don't happen instantaneously, and those dynamics are important in coming up with an optimal policy. Now, this is sort of my take on an if-then decision rule using a control mindset. okay? So what we're dealing with, you have an outcome of interest, you have a set point, that term has already been used a number of times, Eric alluded to it, which is the versus a desired goal. And then you have the control error, which is the discrepancy between what you're measuring and where you want to be. So the if-then rule is basically, well, if this error is not equal to 0, your outcome's not a goal, then you have some equation that decides on how to change your dosage. And this equation is going to depend on current and previous errors and possibly prior changes you've made. Now the challenge is, how do you functionally come up with this equation? Okay, that is. And then if the error, you're out of the goal, then you don't change anything, right? Okay. Now let's try to flesh this out in here, and we go into this little table that I developed here using tuning rules. Okay, so if you have a static kind of change, then you can use what's called a proportional only controller, and this is a model-based tuning. If it's like a first-order system, you get something that's a little bit more complicated. We call this a proportional integral controller. So this depends not only on the current error, but the previous error. This is model-based. An integrating system, which is what I showed for weight gain and loss, is also a PI type controller. Okay, and this is all model-based, and you can see that I can go further. In fact, my next slide I will go further. That as my model sophistication increases, my controller sophistication increases. Another thing that I want to make clear, and I hope this doesn't come across as too controversial, but when you're dealing with systems that have dynamics, okay, an if-then decision rule, it's only based on the current value of the tailoring variable, is suboptimal. Okay? It might be better than what you've done before, but it's suboptimal. So, so this process using control engineering involves recognizing this dynamic behavior and then tuning appropriately. By the way, I hope that this handwritten stuff doesn't bother anybody too bothered with this, because I was thinking about, I used my first job after I got my Ph.D. was a shell development company in Houston. And we had a big extramural program. We'd have academics come over. And this is in the day of overheads. Okay, I'm sorry that dates me. This is in the late 80s, these overheads. And we had faculty come over, and you could tell that they worked on their overheads on the plane. And as I was thinking, I got my PhD, I was working there, so I go into academia, and I'm like, I can do that. I can do my stuff on the plane. I did not do this on the plane, okay? But I might have started it. But it's sort of cool that now with the iPads and that kind of thing, you can just go ahead and relive those great moments. So then here, I don't have the full tuning rule written here, but this is for the system that has the inverse response. Then you have what we call a PID type controller, which involves current and previous errors. In this case, it involves a previous move. And we say, by the way, we say PID, we don't say PID. I tell my students, if you call it PID, you're sounding stupid. We just mention it out. So here, again, we have dynamics, we have methodologies. In this case, it was within a model control that lets us be able to tune these and get these functions. But our real problem involves all these complications, and a number of these things were things that Billy alluded to, right? So we have to decide on multiple intervention dosages. We have to consider multiple outcomes. We have to incorporate strategies that might be more than just feedback. Some of the things that Dana was describing basically correspond to what we call feed forward. You can anticipate that something, you know that, for instance, it's going to be very hot outside, and you might decide to make a particular intervention dosage treatment decision on how hot it is, independent of how the person outcome is like. So this kind of decision making, the fact that you have constraints, you might have limits in terms of your dosages. Your dosages might also be in discrete values. So you're going to have to go beyond the PID, and what we use is what's called model predictive control. Okay, and this model predictive control is basically a real-time optimization. It comes from operations research, okay? And it involves what's called a mixed energy quadratic program. It's a very well-established optimization technology. It does not require a supercomputer, okay? And basically in the MPC approach, what we're doing is we're using the model. See, what's happened in the past, you can't do anything about. But with the model, you can look into the future, and what the MPC algorithm does is systematically decides on future dosages based on a prediction and a comparison with the desired goal, which can change over time. And if you have any kinds of forecasts of disturbances, you can incorporate, and then this is solved in an optimization problem. You solve this over a horizon, you pick the first one, and then at the next decision point, you solve this again. Okay, and this, this technology was developed by chemical engineers, but it's used in all sorts of applications at this time. Okay, so that's going to be, that's what we're going to use. That's what we want to do things in MPC, because ultimately that's going to handle our real problem, all the challenges associated with that. Now, we had talks about behavioral theory, and Donna with the chocolate example, and Bonnie, and so I, I've been involved in this work for a while. I was fortunate in 2007 to be able to get a K-25 from NIDA. I was sitting in a SEM class, and then it sort of dawned on me that, hey, you could take all these path diagrams and basically translate them into fluid analogies. And Donna spoke a little bit about the fluid analogies. And I know that this is for theory of planned behavior, and I show it. I know, Donna, you did not like the things that were going in one direction and did not have feedback. But the nice thing about the theory of planned behavior is that you have this nice path diagram, and we've written papers where we can translate this into a fluid analogy where you basically have your concepts of interest are either increasing or decreasing based on the interaction between each other and external effects. And once we have this fluid analogy here, we can just write, by doing just straight conservation, we can get a differential equation. We can get a system of differential equations, and we have now a mathematical model. Donna showed this SCT model, and we have this, this was actually an effort, very much of a team science approach, involving Bill Riley from OBSSR, and Eric, of course, and other folks that are ASU, and we have papers that are in Translational Behavioral Medicine, and then also in IEEE Transactions and Control System Technology. And what's interesting about this problem is that it's interesting because now on both screens it's missing stuff. The little levels are missing from, but that's okay. The social cognitive theory does not have a path diagram, at least one that anybody likes, or anybody that all people can agree to. So here it was just a matter of hashing it out. So I actually went, we're sort of, we get a little sentimental, we like to keep stuff, so this was Bill Riley's just, this is, it doesn't, so I'm trying to encourage you here to say that if you want to use these approaches, just write these relationships down. It doesn't have to be a formal path diagram. It can be a path diagram like. And this was back, in fact, tomorrow will be the 8th birthday of this plot. So so I was noticing that. This is just Bill Riley just putting some stuff together, and then looks like, again, very interested in this work. I responded in 3 days with a fluid analogy. And then going through the email trail, this is actually a year later, but we had a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions. Again, Eric is a witness because, not aspects of the theory not agreed to by all behavioral scientists. So the key for me showing this one is that within a year's time, Bill felt comfortable writing a fluid analogy. So when we work with teams, we like to encourage people to be able to learn the skills to do this. Because after all said and done, you're really just formalizing how variables are interconnected, and you're just doing accounting. I'm not trying to trivialize it, but you're sort of just keeping track of how these inventories ebb and flow. This is another, I don't know if you remember this one, Eric. We had a talk at SBM. So I had this one lying around from a talk at SBM some years ago. And when we built this model, we were very keen on having it display this inverted U behavior where if you gave an ambitious goal, it would be counterproductive. And we wanted our model to show that. And through a fair amount of discussion, and we actually came up with a way of enhancing our model to do that, basically by tying it to changes in self-efficacy and creating a new signal. Okay, so this effort of building models of this kind will help you understand your problem so much more than you would ever have otherwise. And it might be painful at first, but it is not insurmountable. Now let me, So let me put this together in the context of this intervention, this Just Walk intervention that we had funded through NSF Smart and Connected Health. And everything, by the way, everything that I've been showing is ideographic. It's for N of 1. And here again, we wanted to try our different ideas, and in particular, we want to be able to get the dynamic role models using system identification. This is most of our population was female. Okay, this is our team, or part of our team, because there were other aspects of it, but this is what we call the modeling and more, with students from both engineering and then School of Nutrition and Health Promotion, which was Eric's affiliation when he was at ASU. And the key thing in this particular intervention is to give goals, daily step goals, and then if the goals were met, individuals would get reward points that would allow them then to that they could cash for Amazon gift cards. And so that's basically in the open loop part of the intervention. The idea is just to adjust these to try to get a dynamical model. The individuals only got points if they met the goal. And then, of course, where the main outcome is steps, but then we're interested in other behavioral outcomes as well. And so if you, I don't know, again, thinking in terms of the closed loop, we had an app that was for Just Walk, the MPC, that we call it hybrid MPC, but that's just a technical, the hybrid is just a technical aspect to the name. It's informed by our model. And this sort of show, these, by the way, these are the daughters of one of the Ph.D. students in my group that work on it. I wish I could say that these were my daughters, but they are Cesar Martins. He's a professor at ESPOL in Ecuador. Okay, and again, the app gave us a lot of information that we could record from individuals that they were doing on a daily basis. And see here, key aspect of system identification is our experimental testing. And I quote, I was teaching numerical methods classes in last year and ran into the box on minor statistics for experimenters. And they really had a lot of gems. And one of them is this, is to find out what happens when you change something it is necessary to change it. Okay, so our study very deliberately creates changes in the goals and basically the available points. We basically increased. So there's a baseline. We understand the baseline, and then we introduce. These are multi-signs. These are actually deterministic signals, but they're meant to be pseudo-random, so that people can't necessarily sort of game them. And then they're periodic, and we had basically a 12-week, average 12-week per participant. And then our modeling procedure, our first aspect of our modeling procedure is a black box, where we basically identify what's called an ARX model, which is a model that is a difference equation based on the different inputs that we could measure. And different orders, and then we have a validation. We have various validation metrics, but this is all involves linear regression. We had again, the papers go into more detail. I don't have the luxury to go into all the detail, but we should all feel comfortable with using linear regression, and we had a systematic way of adding the different components that we thought would be important in personalizing. And this is one representative data set for a participant. So you can see here that these are the two inputs that we manipulated. These are the granted points which they got if they did meet the goal. And then we have, these are some of the variables of busyness, stress, whether they was typical weekday or weekend. And then through a systematic process with our ARX modeling, we could then see how well we could fit. So in this participant was doing a pretty good job at following the goals. And from these models, and we've written about it, we could actually obtain personalization. I don't know if you recall, Eric had a very nice graphic that had different individuals and what made them tick. And this process allowed us to understand whether people were stress affected. We could, basically by looking at the goodness of fit measure and seeing how much things increase when you added a particular variable. Again, in the interest of time, I cannot go into a lot of the details, but the papers that I mentioned go into this into more detail. Now, our aspirational goal is to validate that social cognitive theory model. And by the way, one nice side product of developing that SCT model is that we've seen people use it for modeling human-robot interaction. And we've seen people use it outside of behavioral medicine. Another paper that's basically how people interact with their air conditioning. And so, it's sort of like, like the Field of Dreams, you build it and they come. So here, with this particular, we have a subset of the model that involves operant learning and a self-efficacy loop, and we can show that this semi-physical model is pretty much equivalent to our black box model. Our black box model is only interested in the input and output, and then the semi-physical model, it gives us a little bit more detail into the mechanisms that are going on. Okay? Now, closing the loop, so the system identification is, again, doing this test to get data that we can then estimate a dynamical model, whether it be the ARX or a semi-physical model. Now we put this in terms of a control system that would actually receive, this would be the set points, the daily desired steps, and then it would make adjustments on the goals and expected points. And this is done systematically by the model predictive control algorithm. And this result is now in simulation. What I showed you before on the participant data, that's real participant data. And you can see here how the control system is just trying to take the individual from a baseline to the 10,000 points, and it's adjusting the goals and the reinforcement points. When it gets close to the goal, then it basically can switch off the reinforcement. But if it does, if the individual sort of falls off the wagon, there can be then a reconfiguration of the controller to address that. Okay, so this is now the decision algorithm working on our model, and our proposed mechanism is a so-called control optimization trial. Eric showed this briefly in his talk, and I will just expand on it, where we now have a combination of the system identification test. See, the system identification test is a useful intervention in the sense that people do improve on their steps, but the main purpose of that intervention is to understand dynamics. And then so we get data, get our model, and then we commission our control system to take us to the 10,000 steps. And this we call the control optimization trial. And this is again shown in simulation, and we're seeking funding to do this on participants, and we're doing this in a number of projects. And hopefully this is something that is appealing to you and to some of the problems that you're looking at. So in summary, hopefully I've made my case. Again, the question was rhetorical: what does control system have to offer? And I've there's a lot of interesting behavioral problems that will take advantage of control engineering. I already, if you don't, if you want to remember just one thing, remember that if you have dynamics in your problem and you're just using the current value of the tailoring variable and if-then rule, your decision making is suboptimal. The control engineering tells us that. We use behavioral theories as a way of adding physics to the problem, and we hope that the control optimization trial is something that becomes more and more routine. In fact, I asked Bonnie for her presentation from Monday, and I guess I know that the mHealth series it's been reviewed, and the second funding cycle hasn't been decided or whatnot, but I'm assuming that it has. Okay, so basically I have a slide that I would hope that Bonnie would show in the 2023 mHTI. Okay, so she's got the smart Gide, and then she's got the control optimization trial. So no pressure. But for everything that Bonnie talked about, she was involved in. And if Bonnie gets to try this out, then that will be full validation as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, Eric, if you would agree as well. Okay? So, yeah, so again, you know, we've had a number of sponsors for this work and the students helping us out, and thank you for listening to me.
All right. Any questions out there?
Yeah.
In the control optimization trial, what do you do with the possibility, or what do you do in the case in which you can't identify a system that has sufficient performance that you can't find a model that?
You use an if-then decision rule based on the current value of the tailoring variable.
And you just continue that until
Yeah.
Oh.
That's interesting because we're writing a proposal right now where we sort of have to deal with that possibility. And so I thank you for asking this question because it allows me to clarify. It's not that the if-then decision rules are bad, it's just that they are suboptimal. And if you find yourself in a situation where you can't, for a particular participant, you can't get a good model, then you have to resort to another decision strategy. But then, you know, we sort of, that's, you know, part of the research and whatnot is being able to figure out these conditions under which you can get an informative model. And in fact, you know, we sort of trade off different things. We want to have information in how we design the multi-signs and how many we run and their magnitude, and we have to sort of parlay that with other constraints in the problem. Yeah. Any other questions?